Why humans easily fall into self-deception. Introduction. Hello everyone. Today I would like to talk about self-deception, one of the most subtle traps of human psychology. We often live deceiving ourselves. We tend to choose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. In this audiobook, we will explore why humans easily fall into the trap of self-deception and how to escape from this self-deception to face our true selves. Chapter 1. The nature of self-deception. What is self-deception? Simply put, self-deception is the act of lying to oneself. Instead of facing uncomfortable truths, we believe what we want to hear. This is different from simple ignorance. Ignorance means not knowing, but self-deception involves knowing at some level, yet refusing to acknowledge or ignoring it. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith. This refers to the paradoxical state of lying to oneself while knowing that it is a lie. Through self-deception, we escape from uncomfortable reality. However, this escape only provides temporary comfort and eventually leads to greater pain. Interestingly, only humans experience the complex psychological phenomenon of self-deception. Animals act according to instinct and do not try to hide or distort their true nature. A lion does not deceive itself into thinking it's a herbivore, and a rabbit does not imagine itself as a predator. Only humans have the ability to reconstruct their reality and create narratives that are comfortable to themselves. Self-deception often occurs as a result of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance refers to the uncomfortable emotional state that occurs when we hold two contradictory thoughts or beliefs simultaneously. To resolve this discomfort, we distort or rationalize reality. For example, someone who smokes despite knowing it's harmful to health makes excuses like, "I don't smoke that much. I exercise a lot, so it's okay." Or, "My grandfather smoked all his life but lived to be 90. Such self-deception may temporarily help maintain psychological stability, but in the long run, it hinders personal growth and development. A person caught in self-deception does not acknowledge their weaknesses and therefore misses opportunities to improve them. Also, the greater the gap with reality, the greater the psychological instability. Chapter 2. Psychological mechanisms of self-deception. Self-deception often happens unconsciously. Our brains use various defense mechanisms to maintain psychological stability. One of these defense mechanisms is self-deception. Psychologist Sigmund Freud called these defense mechanisms the protective shield of the ego. When our brain encounters threatening or uncomfortable information, it tries to protect the ego by distorting or denying it. This can be seen as an instinctive response for survival. In an interesting study, researchers investigated how people respond when they receive evaluations about their intelligence or abilities. Participants first took an IQ test and then learned their scores. Interestingly, many of those who did poorly claimed that the test itself was unfair or made excuses that they weren't in good condition that day. This is a typical example of self-deception. Instead of facing the unpleasant reality, low test scores, they distorted reality to protect their ego. Another psychological mechanism is confirmation bias. We tend to pay more attention to information that supports our existing beliefs or hypotheses, and ignore or devalue information that contradicts them. This reinforces our existing beliefs and leads us into a cycle of self-deception. For example, someone who believes they are an excellent driver ignores their driving mistakes or blames them on external factors, and only remembers successful driving experiences. This selective memory and interpretation forms a self-image that is disconnected from reality. Another aspect of self-deception is the fundamental attribution error. This refers to the tendency to attribute other people's behavior to internal factors, such as their personality or intentions, while attributing one's own behavior to external factors such as situations or environments. For example, if someone else fails an exam, we think they are lazy, but if we fail, we think the exam was too difficult. Self-deception is thus deeply rooted in our cognitive processes, and recognizing and overcoming it is not easy. However, understanding self-deception is the first step towards self-awareness and growth. Chapter 3: The Social Dimension of Self-Deception. Self-deception is not simply an individual phenomenon, but occurs and is reinforced within a social context. We fall into self-deception due to the desire to be recognized by others, the desire to conform to social norms, and the fear of social rejection. Social psychologist Irving Goffman explained this through the concept of impression management. In social interactions, we express ourselves in certain ways and strive to make good impressions on others. In this process, we often experience a gap between our real self and our social self. Cynically speaking, our society actually encourages self-deception in some ways. A culture that emphasizes positive thinking and confidence sometimes degenerates into a form of reality denial and self-deception. Social media reinforces this tendency. We selectively share only our best moments, creating a distorted standard for comparing ourselves with others. Self-deception in the workplace is also common. Overestimating one's abilities or attributing failures to external factors are defense mechanisms to maintain professional self-esteem. This self-deception may help maintain confidence in the short term, but in the long run, it hinders growth and development. Collective self-deception also exists. This occurs when a particular group or society ignores or reinterprets uncomfortable truths. For example, society often falls into collective self-deception about complex issues, such as environmental problems or social inequality. Instead of acknowledging the seriousness of the problem, they minimize it or divert attention to other issues. Interestingly, such social and collective self-deception often becomes institutionalized and normalized. We accept it under the name of culture or tradition and live within it. This shows that self-deception is not simply an individual psychological phenomenon, but a complex phenomenon that is socially constructed and maintained. Chapter 4: Self-defensive instinct and self-deception. The fundamental, perhaps most powerful cause of self-deception lies in the instinct for self-defense. Humans have an instinctive desire to protect themselves for survival, and this applies not only to physical threats, but also to psychological threats. Thoughts like, "It's not my fault," "I'm fine," are psychological shields to protect oneself from uncomfortable truths. We try to protect our ego by denying our mistakes or weaknesses, or by transferring responsibility elsewhere because it is painful to admit them. These defense mechanisms can provide psychological stability in the short term, but in the long run, they hinder growth and development. A person who does not acknowledge their mistakes misses the opportunity to learn from them and is more likely to repeat the same mistakes. The self-defense instinct is also related to the just world hypothesis. This is the belief that the world is fair, and good things happen to good people, and bad things happen to bad people. This belief provides us with psychological stability, but is disconnected from reality. To maintain this belief, we often distort or reinterpret reality. For example, when someone experiences an unfortunate event, we might unconsciously think, "Something happened to them because they did something wrong." This is self-deception to provide a sense of security that such a thing won't happen to us. Also, we are prone to self-deception when we feel a threat to our value or ability. For example, thinking, "He got promoted because of connections rather than ability," when a capable colleague gets promoted, may be self-deception to avoid doubting one's own abilities. This self-defense instinct was an essential element for human survival and adaptation. But in modern society, it often becomes an obstacle to individual growth and development. Facing and accepting one's weaknesses or mistakes may be painful, but it is the starting point for true growth and self-realization. Chapter 5. Social recognition needs and self-deception. Humans are fundamentally social beings. We form our identity in relationships with others and build self-esteem through recognition and acceptance from others. This need for social recognition often leads to self-deception. We dress ourselves up to look good and sometimes hide our true selves. From portraying a perfect life on social media to hiding our anxieties and fears in the workplace, we engage in various forms of self-deception to gain recognition from others. The problem is that as this pretense is repeated, we gradually forget our real selves and become trapped in a false self. We suppress our true desires and emotions to meet others' expectations and social norms, and this eventually leads to psychological instability and dissatisfaction. Psychologist Carl Rogers called this conditional positive self-regard. This refers to a state where one values oneself only when certain conditions, e.g., success, popularity, appearance, etc., are met. In this state, true self-acceptance and growth are difficult. Another form of self-deception based on the need for social recognition is the imposter syndrome. This refers to a state where one thinks that their success or ability is due to luck, timing, or other external factors, and fears that their real self will be revealed someday. In this state, one cannot fully enjoy their achievements and constantly tries to prove themselves. Our society often reinforces such self-deception. Social definitions of success and happiness often focus on external achievements and material abundance, which leads us to strive to meet external standards instead of connecting with our true selves. However, cynically speaking, such self-deception based on the need for social recognition eventually leads us to emptiness and dissatisfaction. A life of deceiving oneself for the recognition of others does not bring true happiness and satisfaction. True satisfaction and peace come when we accept our true selves and express them honestly. Chapter 6. Pain, avoidance and self-deception. One of the most basic human instincts is to avoid pain and seek pleasure. This applies not only to physical pain, but also to psychological pain. We often fall into self-deception to avoid facing uncomfortable truths, negative emotions, and our failures or limitations, because it is painful. Self-deception postpones pain and provides immediate peace. Instead of facing uncomfortable reality, we gain temporary relief by denying or reinterpreting it. However, this is not true peace, but disguised stability that sickens the soul. For example, ignoring signs of health problems or not facing relationship problems may reduce anxiety and pain in the short term, but in the long run, it causes bigger problems. Health problems may worsen, and relationship problems may become more complex. Pain avoidance is also closely related to addictive behavior. Addiction to alcohol, drugs, gambling, and even seemingly healthy activities like work or exercise often stems from attempts to avoid painful emotions or reality. Cynically speaking, modern society provides numerous tools and methods that promote such pain avoidance and self-deception. In the flood of constant entertainment and information, we tend to cover up uncomfortable feelings or thoughts with external stimuli, instead of connecting with our inner selves and facing them. However, paradoxically, these attempts to avoid pain often result in greater pain. The more we suppress or ignore uncomfortable emotions or thoughts, the more they are expressed in stronger forms or transformed into other problems. True healing and growth begin not by avoiding pain, but by accepting and facing it. Mindfulness meditation that observes uncomfortable emotions or thoughts without judgment or processing emotions with the help of a professional can be healthy ways to grow through pain. Wisdom related to this can also be found in the Bible. John 8:32 says, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." This suggests that only when we face and accept the truth can we experience true freedom and peace. Chapter 7. Types and examples of self-deception. Self-deception manifests in various forms. In this chapter, we will look at the types and specific examples of self-deception commonly seen in everyday life. 1. Selective perception. We tend to selectively accept information that supports our existing beliefs or preferences and ignore or devalue information that contradicts them. For example, a person with a particular political view may only read news that supports their view and think opposing opinions are biased or fake news. 2. Rationalization. Rationalization is the process of logically justifying one's actions or thoughts. For example, when a person on a diet eats cake and then thinks, "I was very stressed today, so it's okay," or "I'll exercise harder from tomorrow." This is an example of rationalization. 3. Projection. Projection is transferring emotions or thoughts that one does not want to acknowledge to others. For example, a person who feels jealousy but does not want to admit it might think, "That person is jealous of me." 4. Denial. Denial is simply ignoring uncomfortable reality or emotions or acting as if they don't exist. Examples include ignoring signs of health problems or not acknowledging addiction problems. 5. Self-enhancement. Bias. This is the tendency to evaluate one's abilities or characteristics more positively than they actually are. For example, most drivers think of themselves as above-average drivers, which is statistically impossible, of course. 6. Victim identity. This is attributing the cause of one's failures or misfortunes entirely to external factors or other people. This can be an excuse to avoid personal responsibility and not take action for change. 7. Future self-overestimation. This is acknowledging current problematic behavior, while overestimating that one's future self will easily overcome it. For example, thinking, "It's okay to overeat this weekend. I'll definitely diet from next week," falls into this category. These types of self-deception often overlap and permeate our daily lives. Recognizing which type of self-deception you are vulnerable to is an important step in self-awareness. One interesting case is the so-called Dunning-Kruger effect. This is a psychological phenomenon where people with low ability tend to overestimate their abilities, while conversely, highly skilled people often underestimate their abilities. This is a perfect example of how a lack of self-awareness leads to self-deception. Cynically speaking, modern society's discourse that everyone is special further reinforces this self-deception. In the flood of social media and self-help books, we are exposed to messages that emphasize unlimited possibilities rather than facing our limitations. This creates an exaggerated self-image rather than a realistic self-assessment. Chapter 8. Self-deception from an evolutionary perspective. From an evolutionary perspective, what adaptive function does self-deception serve? Why did natural selection develop a tendency to deceive oneself instead of the ability to see truth as it is? Evolutionary psychologists suggest that self-deception may have developed as a strategy to deceive others more effectively. That is, when one believes in their own lie, that lie becomes more convincing. In competition for survival and reproduction, the ability to overestimate oneself and persuade others of it may have provided a survival advantage. Also, self-deception can help reduce stress and anxiety by providing psychological stability. Since excessive anxiety and worry can interfere with effective action, some degree of optimistic bias may be adaptive. However, the important point here is that this evolutionary explanation does not mean that all forms of self-deception are still adaptive today. Evolution has shaped us to adapt to the environment in which our ancestors lived, and in the complex context of modern society, such adaptations may actually be maladaptive. The evolutionary perspective provides a useful lens for understanding human behavior, but it is just one perspective. The complex psychology and behavior of humans cannot be fully explained by a single theory, and an integrated understanding of various perspectives and academic fields is needed. The Bible provides another perspective on human nature. In Romans 7:15-24, Paul describes the inner conflict of humans as follows: I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Wretched man that I am. Who will deliver me from this body of death? This shows that humans often have contradictory perceptions about their actions and motivations. Chapter 9. Culture and Self-Deception. Self-deception is a universal human phenomenon, but its specific forms and expressions may vary depending on culture. Culture provides the framework through which we understand ourselves and the world, and this influences the aspects of self-deception. For example, in Western individualistic cultures, the self-enhancement bias of evaluating oneself above average is strongly manifested, while in East Asian collectivist cultures, this tendency is less pronounced. Instead, in East Asian cultures, the self-effacement bias of exaggerating one's weaknesses is more common. These cultural differences reflect the values and norms that each society emphasizes. In cultures that emphasize individual achievement and autonomy, it may be adaptive to evaluate one's abilities and characteristics positively. On the other hand, in cultures that value harmony and interdependence, it may be more valued to lower oneself and prioritize relationships with others. However, despite these cultural differences, the basic psychological mechanisms of self-deception are universal. People from all cultures tend to avoid uncomfortable truths, rationalize their actions, and reinterpret reality to maintain self-esteem. From a cynical perspective, certain cultural values, or norms themselves, may be forms of collective self-deception. For example, the social belief that material success is a measure of happiness is leading many people into an empty pursuit. But this is often accepted as an unquestioned truth. Also, culture provides narratives that justify and reinforce self-deception. The message that you can achieve anything if you try hard can be positive motivation, but it can also lead to self-deception that ignores the reality of social inequality and structural barriers. The Bible warns against such cultural self-deception. Romans 12:2 teaches, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." This advises us to critically examine cultural norms and values instead of accepting them uncritically, and to evaluate them in light of higher truth. Chapter 10. The Cost of Self-Deception. Self-deception may provide short-term psychological stability, but in the long run, it exacts a serious price on individuals and society. In this chapter, we will examine the various negative consequences of self-deception. 1. Hindrance to growth and development. Self-deception makes it difficult to acknowledge and learn from one's weaknesses and mistakes. A person who blames their failures on external factors or ignores their weaknesses misses opportunities to grow. True development begins with accurately recognizing one's current state. 2. Damage to relationships. Self-deception often has a negative impact on interpersonal relationships. A person who does not honestly recognize their actions or emotions finds it difficult to form genuine connections with others. Also, the tendency to not acknowledge one's responsibility and blame others damages trust and intimacy. Third, Deterioration of mental health. Self-deception may reduce anxiety and stress in the short term, but in the long run, it leads to psychological instability. The greater the gap between reality and one's perception, the greater the inner conflict and instability. This can lead to mental health problems such as depression, anxiety, and addiction. Fourth, distortion of decision-making. Self-deception interferes with sound decision-making. A person who does not see reality as it is, but distorts it according to their preferences or expectations, is more likely to make wrong decisions. This can have serious consequences, not only in the personal realm, but also in various areas such as business and politics. 5. Loss of meaning and purpose in life. When one is trapped in a false self without connecting with their true self, it is difficult to experience meaning and purpose in life. A life that pursues external success or recognition while ignoring one's true values and needs eventually leads to emptiness and dissatisfaction. Sixth, collective disaster. Beyond the individual level, collective self-deception can lead to social, political, and environmental disasters. Complex problems such as climate change, economic inequality, and social division are often exacerbated by collective self-deception. A society that focuses on short-term benefits without facing uncomfortable truths pays a serious price in the long run. Cynically speaking, the greatest irony of self-deception is that it eventually amplifies the very pain and unhappiness we are trying to avoid. Rejecting truth for short-term comfort is like borrowing money with a credit card. You can postpone the pain for now, but eventually you pay the price with higher interest. The Bible warns of this cost of self-deception. First, John 1:8 says, "If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us." This suggests that not acknowledging one's flaws and limitations results in being further removed from truth. Chapter 11. First steps to escape self-deception. The first step to escape self-deception is to acknowledge that one can fall into self-deception. This begins with the humble confession, "I am a being who can deceive myself." This awareness forms the basis for self-checking and reflection. It is important to develop the habit of critically examining one's thoughts, emotions, and actions, and recognizing patterns of self-deception. This includes asking oneself questions such as, am I looking at this situation objectively, or am I distorting it according to my desires or fears? How would I judge if someone else did the same action as me? Is my belief about this situation based on evidence, or is it based on my preferences? Are there uncomfortable truths that I am avoiding? Since self-deception often happens unconsciously, recognizing it is not easy. Therefore, it can be helpful to develop relationships with trustworthy people who can provide honest feedback. Looking at oneself through the eyes of others is an important tool for discovering one's blind spots. Also, practices such as mindfulness meditation can be effective in increasing self-awareness. Practicing observing one's thoughts and emotions without judgment helps recognize and overcome automatic reactions and defense mechanisms. From a cynical perspective, one should be careful that the effort to escape self-deception itself can become a new form of self-deception. The belief, "I am living completely honestly," can itself be self-deception. True self-awareness includes acknowledging one's limitations and accepting the need for continuous self-examination. An honest person is not a perfect person, but a person who has the courage to face the truth. This means having the willingness to endure discomfort and vulnerability. Acknowledging one's weaknesses, mistakes, and limitations may be painful, but it is the starting point for true growth and freedom. The Bible emphasizes the importance of such self-reflection. In Psalm 139, verses 23 to 24, it prays, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me, and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. This shows a humble attitude of honestly looking into one's inner self and recognizing patterns of self-deception. Chapter 12. The power of self-awareness and honesty. Escaping self-deception and connecting with one's true self means more than just reducing psychological pain. It is the path to a richer and more meaningful life. People with high self-awareness form healthier relationships because they can accurately recognize and express their emotions, needs, and limitations. They can create more authentic and deeper connections. A person who does not deceive themselves does not need to deceive others. Also, self-awareness leads to better decision-making. A person who recognizes their biases and blind spots can more accurately assess reality and make wiser choices. This is an important advantage, not only in the personal realm, but also in various areas such as business and leadership. Self-awareness also enhances emotional resilience. The ability to accurately recognize and accept one's emotions enables more effective coping with stress and adversity. Recognizing and processing uncomfortable emotions instead of avoiding or suppressing them is an important aspect of mental health. Above all, self-awareness and honesty lead to a more meaningful and satisfying life. When we live a life connected to our true selves, instead of being driven by external expectations or social pressure, we can experience greater purpose and satisfaction. Cynically speaking, our society often commodifies and simplifies concepts like self-realization or authenticity. This paradoxically creates new forms of self-deception. True self-awareness is not found in trendy self-help workshops or bestsellers, but develops through continuous self-reflection and sometimes facing uncomfortable truths. The Bible emphasizes the value of self-awareness and honesty. Proverbs 20:27 says, "The human spirit is the lamp of the Lord that sheds light on one's inmost being." This suggests the importance of looking inside and recognizing one's true motives and thoughts. Also, in John 8:32, Jesus said, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." This suggests that facing and accepting the truth, including truth about oneself, is the path to true freedom. Chapter 13. Self-deception from a spiritual perspective. From a spiritual perspective, self-deception can be understood as more than just a psychological phenomenon, but as a matter of the soul. Many religious and spiritual traditions emphasize the importance of self-awareness and honesty, and view self-deception as an obstacle to spiritual growth. In the Christian tradition, self-deception is often connected with pride. Pride means not acknowledging one's limitations and sinful nature, and evaluating oneself higher than reality. This hinders not only one's relationship with God, but also a true relationship with oneself. Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it?" This suggests how difficult it is for humans to accurately recognize their heart, motives, thoughts, emotions. However, the Bible also presents a way out of this self-deception. The psalmist prays, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." Psalm 139:23-24. This shows a humble attitude of honestly looking into one's inner self and recognizing patterns of self-deception. In the Buddhist tradition, the importance of self-awareness and honesty is also emphasized. One of the core teachings of Buddhism is to escape from avidya, ignorance. This means liberation from suffering caused by incorrect perception of reality, especially one's own nature. Various spiritual traditions present methods to increase self-awareness and escape from self-deception through practices such as meditation, prayer, and self-reflection. These practices help us recognize our current moment experiences more clearly by escaping from automatic reactions and habitual thought patterns. Cynically speaking, one should be careful that religious and spiritual practices themselves can sometimes become new forms of self-deception. Clinging to the identity of, I am a spiritual person, or using spiritual growth as another means of achievement or self-enhancement is ultimately just another form of self-deception. True spiritual growth includes humbly accepting one's limitations and flaws and acknowledging the need for continuous self-examination and honesty. This is not a process of avoiding imperfection, but of acknowledging and accepting it. Chapter 14. Practical Self-Awareness Training Methods. Let's look at practical methods to develop higher self-awareness and escape from self-deception. 1. Regular self-reflection. Develop the habit of taking time daily or weekly to reflect on your thoughts, emotions, and actions. You can ask yourself questions such as, in what situations did I become defensive today, this week? Are there uncomfortable truths that I am avoiding? Were there contradictions between my actions and values? From others' perspectives, how did my actions appear? 2. Accepting feedback. One of the best ways to discover your blind spots is to accept feedback from others. Practice requesting honest feedback from trustworthy people and listening to it without becoming defensive. 3. Writing an emotional journal. Recognizing and understanding your emotions is an important aspect of self-awareness. Record your emotional state daily and explore where it came from. This helps recognize emotional patterns and triggers. 4th, mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness meditation, which observes thoughts, emotions, and sensations in the present moment without judgment, is effective in recognizing automatic reactions and habitual thought patterns. Regular meditation practice increases self-awareness and develops the ability to recognize patterns of self-deception. 5. Playing the devil's advocate. For important beliefs or decisions, practice deliberately taking the opposite position. This helps reduce blind confidence in your perspective and develops flexibility of thought that considers various possibilities. 6. Recognizing cognitive biases. We are all vulnerable to various cognitive biases, confirmation bias, halo effect, fundamental attribution error, etc. Study these biases and practice recognizing them in your thought processes. 7. Maintaining a humble attitude. The conviction that you are always right is the first step of self-deception. Acknowledge that there are limitations to your knowledge and perception, and maintain an open attitude to new information and perspectives. 8. Spiritual practices. Spiritual practices such as prayer, meditation, and Bible reflection can help increase self-awareness and escape from self-deception. The teachings of the Bible particularly emphasize the importance of self-reflection and honesty. Cynically speaking, care should be taken that these practices are not reduced to simple self-help techniques or trends. True self-awareness requires continuous effort and sincere mindset. There are no shortcuts or easy ways. The Bible emphasizes the importance of this continuous self-reflection. 1 Corinthians 11:28 says, "Everyone ought to examine themselves before they eat of the bread and drink from the cup." This is a verse that emphasizes the importance of self-examination. Chapter 15. Community and honesty. The journey of escaping from self-deception is not done alone. Healthy communities and relationships play an important role in developing self-awareness and honesty. In relationships with trustworthy people, we get opportunities to discover our blind spots and grow. When we fall into self-deception, true friends can provide honest feedback and remind us of higher truths and values. The Bible emphasizes the importance of such community. Proverbs 27:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." This suggests that true friendship promotes each other's growth and development. Also, James 5:16 teaches, Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. This emphasizes the healing effect of confession and sharing within an honest and vulnerable community. However, not all communities promote honesty and self-awareness. Some groups may actually reinforce collective self-deception. Healthy communities have the following characteristics. Encourage honest and respectful communication. Welcome diverse perspectives and opinions. View mistakes and failures as opportunities for learning. Provide unconditional acceptance and love. Promote mutual accountability and growth. Cynically speaking, many groups and institutions in our society are far from these characteristics of a healthy community. Many organizations prioritize loyalty over honesty, consensus over truth, and stability over growth. In such environments, self-deception becomes a strategy for personal survival and success. Nevertheless, pursuing genuine communities centered on honesty and vulnerability is essential in the journey of escaping from self-deception. We can be mirrors for each other, helping each other live more truthful lives. Conclusion: escaping self-deception and living in truth. So far, we have explored various aspects of self-deception. We have looked at the nature of self-deception and its psychological mechanisms, social dimensions, relationship with self-defense instinct, association with social recognition needs, relationship with pain avoidance, and ways to escape from self-deception. Self-deception is a complex aspect of human psychology and a phenomenon that all people experience to some degree. It may provide psychological stability in the short term, but in the long run, it hinders growth and development, true happiness and satisfaction. Escaping from self-deception is not an easy journey. It requires the courage to face and accept one's vulnerabilities, mistakes, and limitations. It includes facing uncomfortable truths and sometimes re-evaluating one's deep beliefs and identity. However, the rewards of this journey are very great and deep. When we escape self-deception and live in truth, we can connect with a more authentic self, form healthier relationships, and experience a more meaningful and satisfying life. The Bible delivers a powerful message about this power of truth. In John 8:32, Jesus said, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." This suggests that only when we recognize and accept the truth about ourselves and the world can we experience true freedom and peace. Also, Psalm 51 verse 6 says, "Yet you desired faithfulness even in the womb. You taught me wisdom in that secret place." This emphasizes that truthfulness is the foundation of wisdom and growth. The journey of escaping from self-deception is not a one-time event, but a lifelong process. It requires continuous self-reflection, humility, and commitment to truth. This is not always easy, but it is the only path to true growth and change. Therefore, make the prayer of Psalm 139. "Search me, God, and see if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting," a habit of life. This honest and humble attitude is the first step to escape from self-deception and connect with one's true self. Acknowledgements. Thank you sincerely for listening to this audiobook on why humans easily fall into self-deception. I hope that as we explored the complex topic of self-deception together, you gained as many insights as I did. If you found this content helpful, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I plan to create more content on various topics related to human psychology and spirituality in the future. Pressing the subscribe and like buttons would be a great support. Also, I would appreciate it if you shared your thoughts and experiences in the comments. If you have your own insights on self-deception or topics you would like me to cover next, please let me know anytime. Once again, thank you for staying with me until the end, and I wish you a life full of truth, freedom, and peace.